Welcome to Voices of the Prophets. I am Rabbi Rafi Mallet, everybody's Rebbe. We are studying the book of Ovadyah. We are presently in chapter 1. Thank you for joining. Please consider becoming a channel member. I would like to shout out some of our contributors. We had some nice contributions coming to the channel. I want to give credit. If I missed you, send me a message and I will try to catch you in the next broadcast or message me privately, whatever. And of course, our series is brought to you by the Seattle Kollel, seattlekollel.com. Please consider donating to this wonderful organization, bringing Jewish education and programming to the Seattle Jewish community. Shout out to our members, Sephardic One, Will in Indy, okay. Mercedes Raquel, Monique Laterno, Dr. DTU, Sean Watson, Paul Winder, B'nai Noach, Hearts for Hashem, John Volkov, Thomas Jefferson, Tim McMullen, Colin Martin, Nancy Lynn Noach, Guella, Rhonda Rains, Alicia Douglas, 92 Vanguard, Abigail Foster, Common Man Homestead 2016, Fadarecci. By the way, thank you to Jacob Fadarecci for sponsoring my StreamYard account. I'm able to use this streaming platform, which is really great, called StreamYard. And Jacob Fadarecci is making that possible. Thank you so much. I've been meaning to thank him for several weeks, and I keep forgetting. I hope he forgives me. T. Bishop, Anthony S. Boris, Richelieu Randall, Susan Walbrandt, Elena Yun, Tom Averna, Janice Brandon, Zachary, Sandy Bassey, Tim Flanagan, Clifford Cohen, Erica E., and David Ivans. I want to especially thank a number of individuals who donated to the channel recently. William Ferris, thank you for your $50 contribution. Ciro Hernandez, thank you for your $50 super thanks. Paul Winder, thank you for your contribution of 100 rupees. Joel and Christy Dreyer for a $200 donation. And I want to thank Liz for her very generous donation that she did not want me to announce in honor of her mother, who is 83 years old, and her name is Marsha. So thank you, Liz. And in more exciting news that I wanted to announce last week, we now also have sponsorship for an additional weekly series. And that series will take the following form. I was approached to conduct quote unquote private lessons, if you will, with a certain viewer of the channel. And I was approached not by the viewer, but by someone else on their behalf, because they were inspired by this person's participation in the channel and genuine willingness and desire to learn Torah. And they sponsored private lessons for that person. But when I spoke to the person about it, he said he did not want to hoard the lessons for himself, and he would want them to be broadcast publicly. So will, God willing, be starting soon as the schedule can be arranged, a weekly lesson in the book of Genesis, and it'll be similar to our series on Jonah. We'll be analyzing the biblical Hebrew and teaching how to translate it. It won't be in the same format exactly with sheets and so on. It'll be more conversational. I'll be conducting the conversation with this person, and he wants it to be open for anyone to join, to watch, to participate. So that'll be a public private lesson in biblical Hebrew, focusing on the book of Genesis. So look for that. That's upcoming and very exciting. And thank you to our sponsor for that. So look out for an announcement. Welcome, Avigail. We have in the studio Ronald Dickman, Cliff, Tim Flanagan, and Avigail. Thank you so much for being here. Yeah, we did recently change the clocks. I'm sorry for anyone that was confusing too. Just a moment, please. Okay, I'll just share with you what happened over here. This is what happens when you're broadcasting from home and your family is home. Uh oh, wait, one second. Elchanan, come here. All right, I have one more second. Okay, never mind. I'm not gonna tell you what just happened, but um, fun fun things happening in my kitchen while I'm here giving a class, and my wife isn't home, and my kids are in charge of the kitchen. It is what it is. Anyway, I don't remember what I was saying anymore, but thank you everyone for being here. And Judaic Noahide super sticker 4.99. Thank you so much. And that's your beautiful Elchanan. That was my son Elchanan came to tell me about what was going on in the kitchen and whatever. I had a word with um I had a word with him. My kid my youngest is 12. So I'm not like being negligent and letting my little toddlers run around the house without a parent. They're doing just fine. I have teenagers, but they can get into antics. Anyway, everything's going to be fine. No emergency. What else can I tell you? Let's start the class, right? Anyone has questions or comments anytime. Oh, there is a slight problem. I'm very bad at this whole I finally figured it out. Okay, great. The using Google Slides. I'm like every time I forget how to do something, but now I think I got it. Okay. So I am gonna put the slides up. This is not the right slide. Let me go up. Oh, you know what we were talking about the other week? We spoke about verse 4, Ovadyah verse 4, right? If you make your dwelling as high as the eagle, and if among the stars you'll put your nest, from there I will bring you down, said Hashem. And what we said over there, and I mentioned at the end of the class that Malbim, the commentary of Malbim says he'll bring him down to where? He'll bring him down to the valley of Jehoshaphat. And he leaves it there. He like drops the mic. He'll bring you down. I'll bring you down to the valley of Jehoshaphat. Mic drop. And it's like, Valley of Jehoshaphat, what's going on? What are you talking about? So I asked for homework if anyone knew about the valley of Jehoshaphat. Someone sent me an email with some information. Just wondering, as we start the broadcast, if anyone has any contribution on the topic of the Valley of Jehoshaphat. Let me know. So I'll let you know, actually. Oh, look who's here. Jamie Amos. Evening, Rabbi. Welcome, Jamie. Great to see you. I'm just noticing all the wonderful people that are here this evening. Mercedes is here and Liz is here. Thank you again. Red Rosie, my student. You're all my students, but Red Rosie was my first student when I first started teaching in a classroom. She was my first student. She was maybe in the 7th grade. And that was 15 years ago. So do the math. Sandy's here. Hello, Sandy. JJ Otto. Hello. Judaic Noahide. Hello. Shirley Ann Lindbergh. Hello. Okay. So Liz says, good. Joel 4:2. The Valley of Jehoshaphat is in Joel 4:2. So I made a little slide about it, and it goes something like this. See if I can find that slide. Okay, so here's Joel verses 1 and 2. It says, for behold, in those days, and in that time, and when I shall bring back the captivity of Judah and Jerusalem, which, by the way, if you were paying attention since the beginning of the series, you know that that is the time period that Ovadyah is talking about, according to the commentaries, the classic commentaries. This is a time when the Jews shall return to the land of Israel, and there shall be a conflict between the Edomite nations and the Ishmaelite nations over the land of Israel, which we may be watching play out in front of our eyes. It says in verse 2, I will gather all the nations and I will bring them down into the valley of Jehoshaphat. The valley of Jehoshaphat. And I will, Yehoshaphat in Hebrew. And I will enter into judgment with them there for my people and for my heritage Israel, whom they have scattered among the nations and divided my land. Okay? Very interesting. So in Hebrew, you have to know Yehoshaphat. So Yehoshaphat is actually, it's one of the kings of Israel, was Yehoshaphat. And there may have been a geographical valley that was named for him, the Valley of Yehoshaphat. However, here it's being used as a play on words, that Yehoshaphat is a composite of two words. One is God's four-letter name, okay, the Yud name of Hashem, and Shaphat means to judge. It's the valley of God's judgment. So God is talking about in the future time that he will judge the nations who scattered us among the nations and divided the land of Israel, as it were. So take a look. We spoke about the Malbim mentions the valley of Jehoshaphat. Let's see what the Malbim does with these verses, okay? So I don't have a translation, but I'll read to you what it says. And I shall gather all the nations. The Malbim says, then God will cause that all the nations shall gather in the war of Gog and Magog, which Yechezkel, Ezekiel, prophesied. And it is made clear there that at that time, the Bnei Edom, the children of Edom, will be aroused to go to war against the Ishmaelites. So this prophecy in Joel fits exactly into the context of Ovadyah. Okay, now we understand why he mentioned it in his commentary over there, although in very hinting fashion. He says, and afterwards, the Ishmaelites shall make war against the Edomites. And he says, and this will be brought about by God in order to bring them down to the valley of Yehoshaphat. Okay. He says, and the reason it's called the valley of Yehoshaphat is because there I'm going to judge them. I'm going to bring them to judgment over my nation and my inheritance, Israel, for the evils that they did to them. Because even though, he says, even though God did decree upon Israel exile, he says, Haim Azrula Ra'ah. That's actually a verse, I think, in Ezekiel. Haim Azrula Ra'ah literally means they helped the evil, meaning beyond God's decree of the Jewish people being in exile, the nations added additional cruelty, their own additional measures of cruelty upon that decree, that the exile didn't have to be so torturous for the Jewish people, but it was only because of the evil of the nations that they made the exile as hellish an experience as it was for the Jews. And he says they did so in two ways. And that's what it says in the verse. Number one, they scattered the Jewish people among the nations because the Jews were constantly being expelled because of the many expulsions and persecutions and massacres, slaughters, etc., genocides. The word genocide wasn't invented then, but he uses the word hashmadot. Hashmada literally means like extermination, right? So essentially a genocide because of the genocidal acts that the nations performed against the Jewish people. They caused them to flee and scatter across the globe because they were not able to find rest in any of the lands of their enemies. Therefore, they were spread to the furthest edges of the earth. And that's number one. And number two is that they treated the Jews as though they were their property. In one way, that they took my land and divvied it up as though they purchased the land for an inheritance because they felt that the Jewish people were their slaves, and anything that a slave owns becomes the property of the master. So the property of the Jewish people, which was the land of Israel, belongs to the masters of the Jews, whoever was ruling over them. So here is again, the Malbim is making these comments about this end times phenomenon called the Valley of Jehoshaphat, when God will judge the nations for the evil. And this will happen at the same time that there will be this war between the Edomite nations and the Ishmaelite nations, which essentially could be that the war is the judgment. In other words, the suffering and destruction that these nations will experience at that time will be the retribution for this wickedness. But what I thought was very interesting, you notice how he talks about how the nations felt like the land of Israel belonged to them. And we were listening and we were talking about this in the previous classes to the president of the United States talking about how we're going to own Gaza. It's going to be ours, right? And, he doesn't just talk that way about Gaza. Greenland is going to belong to the United States. The Panama Canal is going to be brought back. Canada is going to be the 51st state, and so on and so forth. But one also should acknowledge, I think, that the land of Israel is a focal point in the current political tumult that's happening today, and we may yet see more how much the verses in Ovadyah are going to align with current events. That was just a little tangent I want to take you on about the Valley of Jehoshaphat and how, in fact, it's very much connected to the subject of Ovadyah. Okay, any questions to this point? You're welcome to speak up.
Apparently the more modern assignment is that it's actually the Kidron Valley. I don't know.
Okay.
Why particularly, but it's believed to be the Kidron Valley now.
Okay, like I said, it may be that there's a geographical place that is associated with the Valley of Jehoshaphat. However, when it's spoken of in the book of Joel, similar to the way that Edom in the book of Ovadyah is not referring to geographical Edom as far as the ancient Idumea, but rather to a concept of Edom that are the spiritual descendants of the Edomites, as we spoke about, the Western Christian nations. In the same way, the Valley of Jehoshaphat here is being used metaphorically to refer to an event and a time where God's judgment will be upon the nations that oppressed the Jews over the course of history. Okay, so let's go to now Ovadyah verse number 5. I'll read it in Hebrew and we'll translate it more or less. Okay. Im ganovim ba'u lecha, im shodedei laila, ech nidmeisa, halo yignevu dayam, im botzirim ba'u lach, halo yashiru oleilos. This basically means like this: Im ganavim ba'u lecha, if robbers would come to you, im shodedei laila, if marauders of the night. That's kind of what my translation is that you see on the slide is kind of an amalgam of an English translation that I was using kind of as a starting point, because these verses, being cryptic as they are, can be translated in a number of ways. I didn't want to be so arbitrary. So, and maybe this is still arbitrary, I decided to start from a sort of accepted translation, and I adjusted it when I felt like it could be a little more to the point. So it's not perfect, but we'll get the idea across. Okay. If robbers would come to you, if marauders in the night, Eich nidmeita. So how is it that you would be nidmeita? Now, here I wrote in the English, how were you still? Now, that's based on the Hebrew word like dimama. Dimama means like silence or stillness. So, eich nidmeita, the passive form is, how were you still? How did you just kind of sit there or sleep through it as you were being robbed, as you were being marauded? How could you sleep through such a thing? Now, there are other translations of this word. The minutiae of the translation is not so important. I feel this conveys the idea well enough. If you have questions on it, let me know. It says, but even if you would sleep through it, and how could you? But even if you did, Halo yignevu dayam. Would they not steal their fill? Day in Hebrew means enough. Would they not steal what was sufficient for them, or what they could carry and then leave? Like, they wouldn't take everything. Even a robber who comes by night, they take what they can carry and they move on quickly. They don't want to get caught. They don't tarry. They don't have time to, and they don't have the means to lift everything away. Im botzirim baulach, if the grape gatherers, the grape harvesters would come to you, let's say, to come and steal the grapes from your field, halo yashiru olelot, would they not leave behind what I wrote, the gleaning grapes, basically the small, insignificant clusters? They would take the big juicy grapes and they would ignore the small grapes. So there are two questions that are being expressed by the prophet over here. Number one, if robbers or marauders would come to steal from you, how could you sleep through that? Wouldn't you realize something was going on and wake up and try to stop them, try to defend yourself, try to salvage something? That's number one. Number two, even if you couldn't stop them, wouldn't the robbers only take some things, maybe the most important things, and leave some small things behind? And yet it says about Edom, you were robbed, and it was as though you slept through it. It's like you didn't even know what was happening under your nose, and so thoroughly that there was nothing left. Everything was taken. It's two boggling problems. How did you allow this to happen? And how could robbers so thoroughly rob you? Now, what is this talking about? The commentaries differ. Some understand this to be a flashback to the original Edomites of ancient times, that this is describing the demise of Edom in the past, either the biblical Edom or the Idumea that existed in the time of the Second Temple. Idumea was still a territory south of Judea, which the Jews conquered, as a matter of fact, and forcibly converted the people to Judaism, which was a wrong thing to do. But when the Romans became antagonistic toward the Jews, the Idumeans, who were supposed to be Jews even, the Idumeans joined with the Romans to be the enemies of the Jews, similar to the way the Edomites joined with the Babylonians in the destruction of the first temple. And both of those nations ended up being destroyed. The original Idumea, the biblical one, and then the one that existed in the time of the Second Temple, which I guess was a continuity from the first one. They had recovered from whatever destruction they had experienced by perhaps the hands of the Babylonians. I'm not sure. So this verse may be a reference to something in the past, but others understand it even to be a reference to what will come about in the future, to these Edomite entities that we've described, that they will also experience such a thorough ransacking, if you will, that it will match this description. It'll be something that comes upon them by surprise. It'll happen without their knowledge, and it'll be totally and completely thorough. Now, I don't know if you have any thoughts on what this could be referring to, if it's an event that hasn't happened yet or is perhaps happening right now. Maybe it's in the process of happening. I'd like you to share your thoughts, but I caution you that the next few verses, I would say verse 5, this verse till about verse 8 or 9, is all really one topic that we should see all of it to kind of get a broader view on what's going on and then draw some conclusions. Okay. Linda Hill is here. Welcome. Will and Indy, glad you're feeling better, Rabbi. Yes, we gave you a shout out earlier. Glad you're here. Okay. So let's peek at the next few verses. Any thoughts you have in the meantime, maybe put in the chat, and we'll we'll come back. So here I go immediately to verse 6, where it says as follows: Eich nechpesu Esau yivu matzpunav, which is how has Esau been searched through? His hidden places, matzpunav, his hidden places have been sought out. In other words, some element, some enemy has so thoroughly infiltrated the Edomite nations under their nose without them detecting it, that they were able to search out all of Esau's secrets and infiltrate deep within their within their government, within their society. And this was the cause of what happened in verse 5, that it's saying you're going to be thoroughly robbed by like robbers at night. They're going to come under the cover of darkness, and you're going to be sleeping right through it as they take everything from you. How could it be that Esau was so thoroughly sought through and all their hidden places searched? Okay, so keep thinking about what I've said. Now, here in the next slide, I put a little synopsis, more or less, of everything I just spoke out. But while I was preparing it, I made these notes. Basically says exactly what I just said. Okay, so now we get to verse number 7. Verse number 7 goes into little detail. It says like this: Ad hagivul shilechucha kol anshe verisecha hishiucha yachelu lecha anshe shelomecha lachmecha yasimu mazor tachtecha ein tivuna bo. So what does that mean? Ad hagivul shilechucha, until the border they sent you. Okay. Now, I know this isn't matching exactly the translation, because you're going to see in English, there's a need to kind of rearrange the phrases of the sentence to make an English sentence out of it. But I really would like to break it down in the Hebrew, because the English, in trying to make an English sense out of it, you almost lose some of the meaning of the verse. So I want to read it piece by piece and let you put it together. Ad ha-givul shilechucha, until the border they sent you. Now, who sent you to the border? It says, Kol anshe v'risecha, all the men of your berit, all the men of your covenant. Now, here I wrote, all the men of your covenant, and alternatively, your allies. A berit is an alliance or a covenant. So there were people that you were allied with. There were people that you had some type of a covenant or pact with, and they led you, or they sent you to the border. It's interesting to talk about the border. Whatever's allowed to talk about the border. By the way, now berit, it's interesting because the Hebrew word for the United States of America is Artzot HaBerit. Literally means the lands of the covenant. Artzot HaBerit is the Hebrew for the United States of America. Doesn't say united and it doesn't say states. It says Artzot, the lands of Haberit, the lands of the covenant. I don't know if that has anything to do with this verse, but the word is there. All the men of your covenant sent you to the border. Okay, it says Hishiyucha, they misled you. Okay, they misled you. Now the question is this they misled you going on the men of your covenant misled you? Okay, or does it go with the next phrase where it says Yachelu lecha anshe shalomecha? The anshe shalomecha, the men of your shalom. Shalom is, of course, peace. The men who were at peace with you, anshe shalomecha, the men of your peace, Yachelu lecha. Yachol means to be able. It means they were able to defeat you. They were able to overcome you. Yachelu lecha. We find that in like when Jacob strives with the angel, right? It says that the angel saw ki lo yachol lo, that he was not able to yachol him, which again, yachol means to have the ability over him, to overpower him. to defeat him, as it were. So Yachelulecha anshe shalomecha, the men who were at peace with you overcame you, prevailed over you. I wrote on the English side, prevailed over you. Now again, the Hishiyucha, who is that? The Hishiyucha, they misled you. Is that the Anshe Beritecha, the men of your covenant? Or is that the Anshe Shalomecha, the men of your peace? Is it both? Are they the same? Are they two different groups? All these are questions, right? So we have the men of your covenant. They sent you to the border. You have the men that were at peace with you. They overcame you. They prevailed over you. And between the two of them, there's Hishiyucha. They misled you, as it were. They fooled you. Who? Which one of these groups? Both? Are they the same group? Okay. Next, we have lachmecha. Lachmecha means your bread. Lachmecha yasimu mazor tachtecha. Your bread, put mazor. It's a question what mazor means. Tachtecha, under you, or in your place. Tachtecha could mean under you, beneath you, in your place. So here I wrote in the parentheses, they that eat your bread, and this is basically how everyone understands lachmecha, and I'll talk about what does it mean, they that eat your bread. Literally, it means your bread. So there are people who are called your bread, okay? I wrote placed an infirmity under you. Most of the commentaries understand mazor to mean an infirmity. Why does mazor mean an infirmity? So the zoreh in Hebrew, zoreh means to spread something out. Okay. So when a person has a wound, what he do is he spreads over the wound some type of ointment or medicine or oil or herbs or some type of a medication will be spread out over the wound. So the mazor, the spreading, is synonymous with having a wound. So your bread, or as most of the commentaries, I think all the commentaries see, those who eat your bread will yasimu, they will put an infirmity meaning like a wound, an illness, in your place. In your place. Now, others say mazor means a treatment, like I said, because the what you spread out is actually the medicine. So it means they'll put a medicine in your place, which because what does that mean? These aren't good guys. All these are all your enemies. So what does it mean they put a medicine? So say they give you false hope that they are the solution to your problem. They say, we're going to help you. We're going to solve your problem. And then we let them in and we give them our trust and we open all the doors to them and we give them access to everything and we promote them to high places in the echelons of society. But actually, they have nefarious intent and they're going to betray the nation. And finally, it says, Ein tivuna bo. There is no discernment, I wrote. That's a pretty good translation. There is no discernment in him. Ein tivuna bo. That means in Edom, while this is going on, he does not realize what is happening, that he is heading to his downfall. So the people of your covenant bring you to the border. Now, what's the border about? The commentaries say, in other words, they lead you to get into this conflict. Someone is going to lead Edom, his allies, the people of his covenant. His allies will lead him into a conflict, telling him this conflict is good. And then they won't support him in the time of the actual conflict. And so they fall back, his allies fall back. They were supposed to support him. They don't support him. And Edom, therefore, falls to his enemy. And those who are at peace with you can overcome you. So those who pretended to be your friends actually were in league with the enemy. And now they can overcome you. And lachmacha, those who ate your bread, means that they're going to be people that this entity of Edom is supporting. They're going to be doing a lot of support. They're going to be giving aid to countries around the world. They're going to be giving money to elements within their population that are needy, that they're going to be supporting them financially. They're going to be giving out stipends and financial gifts. And those people who are the recipients of the bread, as it were, of the gifts of this nation of Edom are going to actually be like a fifth column to undermine Edom. Now, what is this talking about? Your thoughts, okay? Your thoughts. T. Bishop says, I try to be super careful tying these prophecies to current events. The J Witness Watchtower Society have fumbled the ball off enough. I agree with you. I agree with you totally. I don't know what this is referring to, and anything that I say is totally and 100%. I wouldn't even say my opinion, maybe a conjecture that entered my brain. I'm sort of just thinking out loud, and it's totally and completely tentative. But what else can we do? What else can we do? We could do nothing. We could wait and see. I don't know. And the truth is, that's what Maimonides says. Maimonides says that the messianic prophecies are ambiguous. There's a reason that they're ambiguous. We're not supposed to know exactly what's going to happen, and it also leaves the door open that it can play out in numerous different ways. And he says, only after the events occur will we be able to look back and say, aha, that was this prophecy. So probably the more we try to figure it out, the more we'll fail. But doesn't mean that it isn't an interesting exercise. Does anyone have any thoughts about this?
In a very global sense, in a very general sense, it sounds rather like the Islamization of the West. And as you went on with your teaching, it sounded a little more specifically like Edom is the USA, and there are alliances and so-called friends in the Arab countries, but where are they going to be at the end? Who are they actually going to support further down the track? Just some thoughts.
Yeah, it could be. It could be. Some of those thoughts crossed my mind as well. So I really don't know, to be honest. Like, who are the people of our covenant that are sending whoever Edom is? And maybe it's the United States, I don't know, to the border. Um, and which means the commentaries say to war with really with the Ishmaelites. Okay, that the commentaries do seem to say pretty openly. But who are the men of the covenant? Are they other Western European countries? Are they other countries like you're saying? Are they maybe our allies in the East that are trying to goad us into some type of a conflict in the East? And when we talk about the people of our peace, Anshe Shalomecha, the men that were at peace with you, misled you, and talk about the Islamization of the West. So first of all, what's interesting is I also thought of this, especially considering the wording of Anshe Shalomecha, the men who were at peace with you, because Islam is related to the word salam, which means peace, which is the equivalent of the Hebrew shalom. And it's almost like the anshe shalomecha, the men of your peace, could be like saying the Muslims among you, right? And then it also makes sense to a certain degree, those who are putting an infirmity in your place, because the Western Europe and the United States, to a great degree, has taken in a lot of immigrants, a lot of refugees from Muslim countries. And as we see from a lot of the unrest that's taking place in these places, that this element is trying to topple the status quo and the sort of societal values and norms of these places. And J.D. Vance, I just heard the quote this week. This week, I heard this quote. Who said it? Glenn Beck said it. He quoted J.D. Vance as saying, and this isn't a direct quote, but it's kind of a paraphrase. It says the Islamic country, J.D. Vance, the vice president of the United States, said something to this effect. the Islamic country that you should be worried about with nuclear missiles will someday soon maybe be the UK. You hear that? It gives you chills. What is the Islam? We're so worried about Iran getting nukes. What would happen if an Islamic country had nukes like Iran? And JD Vance says, you know which Islamic country we need to be worried about that has nukes? Soon the UK. Because if you look at, like you're saying, the radical Islam, and by the way, I'm not anti-Islam. I'm not anti anybody. I think that there's a lot of beautiful teachings in Islam, and I know Muslim people that are very peaceful people. And I also acknowledge that Islam does have a radicalization problem. There is a lot of there are a lot of radical people with radical ideology, let's just say, and that radical ideology is very dangerous. It's very dangerous and it's very sinister. And it's that radical ideology which is spreading and becoming popularized in Western European countries and among Muslims in the United States as well. When you listen to peaceful, righteous Muslim people, like if you ever listen to a guy named Lu'ay al-Sharif, and if you don't know who he is, look him up after this broadcast. Lu'ay, I don't know how to spell it. Lu'ay al-Sharif. He is from Abu Dhabi, and he's a very peaceful Muslim, outspoken Muslim, pro-Israel, and he speaks openly against radical Islam, and he says places in the Muslim world, like he's from, like the UAE and Bahrain, etc., share his views mostly, and he wanted to say that when that Islam is being represented in Western countries as a radical religion, it's the radical Muslims that are leaving the Middle East and being sort of imported into the Western countries, and they're building a radical Muslim society within society in Europe, in the United States, and the Islam that they are touting is the radical form, and we need to oppose it and not to feel like, oh, politically correct. You know, we can't be Islamophobic. We can't be against Islam. He's saying, no, there are many Muslims who don't believe that way. It's just the ones that are leaving and going to the European countries, the ones that are being taken in, are the ones that are coming with this radical ideology and misrepresenting Islam, but building a radical Islamic society in the West. And when we talk about the verses before this, about like robbers in the night coming in under our nose, we're sleeping, we don't know what's going on, and we're being sort of infiltrated. I shouldn't say we, I'm talking as someone who lives in the United States, but Edom being infiltrated by some sinister element that's coming in without our discernment, as it were, and suddenly we're going to wake up and everything's gone. I think that speaks a lot to what JD Vance said, that, you know, one day we're going to wake up and the UK is going to be an Islamic country with nukes, right? So I thought also, as I was watching current events this week, that it could well fit into the verses that we are reading, and maybe not, and maybe not, and maybe not. So just what to think about. This is what I'm translating the verses, and you're welcome to draw your own conclusions.
And Rabbi, also in Great Britain, they're trying to say to them that, you know, your country will be so much better under Sharia law. You know, there will be law and order, discipline, modesty, all of these things. And so they're trying to convince them that it will be peaceful and wonderful, and Sharia law is the best thing in the world. And
Right.
yeah, a lot of people are starting to fall for it.
Right. Right. Another outspoken Muslim against this ideology is a fellow named Imam Tawhidi. So another guy that I like a lot, and he hasn't been I haven't heard him speak up so much lately, but I used to see more of his content. But he's another well-spoken, moderate, really level-headed Muslim guy, Imam Tawhidi. So I would look these two guys up, Lu'ay al-Sharif and Imam Tawhidi, and they basically both say the same things, that the people who are, causing all the rabble rousing in Europe and the United States are not representative of much of the Muslim world or Islam itself. They are sort of they say that the trash. They're saying it, not me. The trash or the garbage that is, being expelled out of Muslim countries, and the West is welcoming them in, and they're bringing their trash and the stench of radical Islam into Western society, and that's the disease, mazor tachtecha, the infirmity in your place. That's why, when Donald Trump says we're going to move the Gazans to other Arab countries, that's why if you look at Egypt's border with Gaza, it's like the most militarized, fortified border you've ever seen. They don't want those people. Jordan doesn't want those people. None of these countries want to take them in because they are a destabilizing element. They are the most radicalized population, and the other Arab countries don't want that in their country. And yet somehow the many European countries, not all, many European countries have opened their doors to them, and I think a decade later, they are greatly regretting having done that. Okay, let's see. Do we have time for a little bit more? It's 8:58. What's next? Here's again a little synopsis of what I more or less spoke out to you, some different possibilities of what these different phrases mean. Okay. And now, I'm just looking at Rashi. Was there anything significant to point out here? Okay, yeah, more or less the same idea. I put a few of the commentaries in the slides in case there was, again, I wanted to make sure I remembered to say everything, but I feel like I kind of said everything. There's the Malbim, pretty much said what he said also. Okay, yeah. Here, this is just I said this, the Mitzudat Zion, I highlighted when he talks about the bread. He says, those who eat your bread, it says, those who take pras, lokchim pras mimcha, they take a pras from you. Pras means like like a monetary benefit, almost like a stipend. They're taking payouts from you. But those are the ones who are going to put the makkah, the wound, in your place. And it says, in your place, they have prepared for you destruction. They have planned evil against you. And yet, the Edomites will not be discerning enough to realize this is going on and to guard against it until it's too late. Now I'm looking at verse 8 over here and verse 9. Okay, maybe we'll say verse 8 and verse 9. It's more or less along the same lines, but verse 9 I have a little bit more to say. So we'll leave verse 8 and 9 together, and we'll call it a night. But I'll pause for any questions if people have questions or comments.
It's a bit scary when it sort of suggests that it's inevitable, but hanging on to the hope that bad prophecy doesn't have to come to pass.
Correct. And again, another thought I had is this. Now, some people disagree with me, okay? And again, I'm expressing what I think is a popular sentiment right now. You don't have to ascribe it to me or assign it to me. And that is that right now, the president of the United States is doing a lot in friendship to the Jewish people. He's supporting the hostages, the hostage families. He's threatening Hamas with utter obliteration. He's demanding the release of the hostages. He's talking to Arab countries about taking the Gazans, which he wants to remove from Gaza. He's talking to Iran about denuclearization. He's doing a lot of things that are directly or indirectly, for the most part, in the interest of Israel and the interest of the Jewish people. He seems and appears to be a very philo-Semitic American president. Now, why in the world, of all the countries, right now, right, talk about history, and as we spoke about in the past, Europe has been terrible to the Jews. Europe, as we said, is a Jewish graveyard. Its soil is soaked with Jewish blood. Thousands of years of massacres of Jews on that continent. And still to this day, there's no great love for the Jews in Europe. America has been historically a haven for the Jews, very generous toward Jewish people, toward the state of Israel since its inception in 1948. On the whole, on the whole, with some exceptions, which I would consider minor exceptions, and continuing to this day, if not more than ever, as a place that is supportive of Jews, at least on a governmental level, even though there may be many anti-Semites in the United States, though probably not to the degree in Europe, right? I think Jews have a lot more friends here than anywhere else. So if we're talking about the downfall of Edom, and either, again, am I purposely making it sound this way, or does it just really sound this way? That a lot of this could sound like it refers to current events with the United States of America. Of all countries, why would the United States of America be the one that Obadiah is prophesying destruction upon? Shouldn't he prophesy destruction on Europe, not America, right? So that may be a clue to begin with that I'm totally off my rocker. Um, I could be totally wrong about all this. However, I would say, as I mentioned before, we're not there yet. America is on a trajectory, and the Jewish people can't imagine that, like, America is always going to be our friend. And I told you the statistics. It looks like in the future, America's not going to be our friend. So we're not talking about this week, this year, or this decade even, but this may be something that is down the line. Also, another scary thing that happened in current events, we had the confrontation between Donald Trump and Vladimir Zelensky, who's Jewish, by the way, in the Oval Office. Everybody saw that, you could have your opinions about it. Some people are like, yeah, Zelensky, he misbehaved, and Donald Trump put him in his place, and JD Vance, like they rightly should. Some of us looked on and said, this is awful. This is horrible. How does a president of the United States behave this way and, just be so awful and rude to another world leader visiting the White House publicly in front of the press, treating Vladimir Zelensky like a child and acting like a child at the same time, and really bullying him in a very crude and awful way. And as I'm watching this, I'm feeling scared. I'm like, what would happen if Benjamin Netanyahu is sitting in the Oval Office with Trump in front of the media, and he says something that Donald Trump doesn't like? Would Donald Trump come down on him the way he came down on Vladimir Zelensky and say, Bibi, we're giving you the weapons. You should say thank you. And of course, Bibi says thank you, but you're not being thankful. You're demanding a lot. And by the way, what's he going to say? You have to do what we want. What was the whole thing with Ukraine? He wanted Vladimir Zelensky to agree to this agreement, which would basically allow Putin to maintain some of the gains territorially from the war in a compromise to for a security guarantee that the war would stop. And Zelensky's like, the guy broke every single agreement we made with him 25 times. You can't give him anything because he's just going to do it again. There is no security guarantee with Putin, right? So, and Donald Trump's like, you're not listening to me. I'm in control over here. You don't have the cards. I have the cards. If you don't do what I say, you're going to get nothing from us. We're going to cut off the aid. Good luck to you. What happens if it's Benjamin Netanyahu? And he says, Benjamin, this is what we want. You're going to give Hamas this, or you're going to give Mahmoud Abbas that, or you're going to give Iran this, or Lebanon or Hezbollah, whatever it is. He says, you know what? For peace, we want the war to stop. You're going to have to make this concession. And Netanyahu says, excuse me, Mr. President, we know who we're dealing with. These are terrorists. These are brutal, genocidal people. We cannot give them that concession because it'll only lead to more attacks and more murder and more danger. And Donald Trump would say, excuse me, you don't have the cards. You're going to have to face them on them. We're going to be out. We're pulling out. And what are you going to do without us? And you could see, I wince at seeing Donald Trump exerting that kind of pressure on the world media stage in front of everybody on the Jewish state like he did to Zelensky. I think it's a cautionary episode.
Absolutely. And Rabbi, I'm so glad you brought that up. I feel like I feel compelled to speak up because your fears, I think anybody who watched that interview was appalled, absolutely terrified by what we were seeing. And I want to invite the other people who are on this, all the folks who are listening to you right now, something that really reinforces what you are saying is there's a fellow by the name of Timothy Snyder. He's a political science professor at Yale University, and he's an expert on Ukraine. He wrote a piece just 2 days ago entitled "Anti-Semitism in the Oval Office," where he breaks down what that encounter, what that confrontation was about, and how closely it resembles and was driven by anti-Semitic tropes that have been around for a very long time. It is an eye-opening article. Anybody who reads this, Timothy Snyder has a blog called Thinking About. And in this blog, he takes this on. And after I read it, I mean, I had many of the feelings that you had about it from a geopolitical perspective, et cetera. But what Snyder does is he explained in a way that made me understand why I was so appalled by what I was hearing, what was giving me that sinking feeling in my stomach when I was watching what they were doing, how they were attacking Vladimir Zelensky. And Snyder lays out exactly what they were doing, how it aligns with anti-Semitic tropes and anti-Semitic philosophy. And I just want to really encourage folks, look it up, go to Timothy Snyder, Thinking About, look for anti-Semitism in the Oval Office. And, it'll really it'll tie a bow around all the things that you were saying.
Okay, well, everyone's welcome to do that, and of course, draw their own conclusions. But that's what I'm saying is that we're at a precipice of a sort of anything can happen, and part of anything can happen. I want to say, like Abigail was saying also, and thank you, Cliff, for your thoughtful remarks, is that the future isn't written in stone, and there are different possibilities, and there is a redemptive potential for a certain element within Edom. And an example of that, I want to speak briefly because the hour is late. But when Rebecca is pregnant with the twins, Jacob and Esau, she doesn't say who she goes to. It says she goes to seek out God. Now, according to Jewish tradition, she goes to Shem, the son of Noah, who was a prophet. And he tells her that there are two nations, Shnei Goyim bevitnech. He says, there are two nations in your belly. Now, the way the word goyim is written there in the Hebrew is an odd spelling. Rather than the normal spelling of goyim, which is gimel, vav, yud, mem, it's spelled gimel, yud, yud, mem. It's unusual spelling. And so the rabbis see in here a hint to the word geim rather than goyim, because it's spelled like the word geim. And Geim means people of stature. Okay, people of stature. There are two people of stature in your womb. Well, Jacob and Esau, probably people of stature. But our sages go further and say that this prophecy was a premonition to two individuals in Jewish history. One who was named Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi, Rabbi Judah the Prince, as it were, who was the leader of the Jewish community after in Israel, after the destruction of the Second Temple by the Romans, and a Roman emperor named Antoninus. He's called Antoninus in the Jewish literature, who is most likely Marcus Aurelius Antoninus. There was more than one Antoninus who was an emperor of Rome, and two Antoninuses were actually one after the other. Antoninus Pius, Pius, and Marcus Aurelius Antoninus. And the question is, which one of those two is it talking about? The likelihood is it's Marcus Aurelius Antoninus. And if you saw the movie Gladiator, he's the good emperor in the beginning of the movie. Jewish history records that Antoninus was an emperor that was extremely favorable towards the Jewish people. He had a beautiful friendship and companionship with Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi, and he halted all Roman persecution against the Jewish people at that time, which is why people don't realize this, which is why Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi, what is he famous for? Who knows what he's famous for? What is Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi famous for? Nobody? Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi redacted what we know today as the Mishnah. The Mishnah, which is the also known as the oral law, or the abbreviated form of the oral law, which is expanded in the Talmudical analysis in the generations that followed. He collected all the oral traditions of his generation, and he redacted them into a compressed version in 6 volumes that we know as the Mishnah. The reason Rabbi Yehuda did it, and the reason he was successful, is because of Antoninus, meaning he saw the Roman persecutions. He saw the way the Romans were preventing the Jewish people from studying and observing the Torah, and he saw that Jewish practice was going to be destroyed. So he knew that the oral tradition needed to be preserved in a form that Jews could carry it into exile and study it and memorize it and use it as a baseboard for discussion of Jewish law. And so he had to create the Mishnah. But the only way for that to happen was for the Roman persecutions to cease. And that was the time of Antoninus, a Roman emperor who was extremely favorable towards the Jews. And he ceased all Roman persecutions against them during this period of time when Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi was able to compile the Mishnah. And because of that, we have Judaism today. And these two were very close. The rabbinic literature records many discussions and conversations they had together in philosophy, etc. And our sages see that this relationship of Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi and Marcus Aurelius Antoninus was foretold in the Torah in that verse when the prophet says to Rebekah, there are 2 nations in your belly. And it's written, there are 2 prominent people inside of you. And the rabbi said, this is a reference to Antoninus and Rebbe. And what that tells me is that there is always a redeemable potential within Esau. And the prophecy of Obadiah is towards that element of Edom, which does not follow the path toward redemption. But I think that those countries like the United States, and it might be the only one that chooses the path of friendship, fidelity, support for the Jewish people and Israel, will survive the travails, or at least those within the United States who are supportive of that, will survive the travails of the end times. So we're speaking really of a potential. And one more remark is that Isaac says when he touches Jacob, who's wearing Esau's clothing, he says, the voice is the voice of Jacob, but the hands are the hands of Esau. And I don't know if it's stated explicitly anywhere, but I always understood this verse to be an expression of what Isaac's hope for his sons was. I hope that these two sons work together. Jacob with his voice, with his teachings, with his spirituality, with the Torah, the voice of the Torah, and Esau with his hands, with his strength, with his might, with his physical dominion, to spread, that they work together to spread the word of God and the knowledge of God to the world to bring its redemption. There's a dual role. There's a Jacob role and there's an Esau role. Esau can fulfill his role in a positive way, though historically he has mainly chosen to fulfill it in a negative way. And the prophecy of Ovadyah is the comeuppance for that negative manifestation of Esau behavior. But there is an Antoninus in there somewhere. There's a Marcus Aurelius. There is an element of Esau that can be a great friend to the Jewish people, that can be very righteous, and that can be redeemed along with the Jewish people. So which role will Donald Trump fill? Which role will America ultimately fill? Which role will any individual fill will be a subject of their own free will. We hope it'll be for the better. And with that, I'm going to call it a night. So thank you all for your participation. Thank you for your support. I hope that we will meet again next week. Oh, happy Purim. Purim will be this coming week, Thursday night and Friday. So for those who celebrate Purim, may you have a very happy Purim. And when I'm recovered from Purim, hopefully by Sunday, we will have our next class on this topic. I hope so. Thank you for joining me. Thank you again for your support. And please, again, if you're on YouTube, like the video, share the video, comment on the video, tell YouTube that this is a video that's generating interest. If you'd like to support the channel, like I said, become a channel member. We have donate links in the description below if you'd like to offer a more meaningful contribution. And thank you so much again, everybody. Have a super great night.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thanks, Rabbi. Happy Purim.
You too. Good night, Avigal. Good night, Tim. Good night, Cliff. Good night, Ronald.
Thank
Good
you.
night, Liz. Good
Have a
night,
good week.
Trey. Good night, Sandy. Good night, Shirley. Good night, JJ. Good night, James. Good night, Will and Indy. Good night, Golden Gun. Good night, Lindsay. Good night, Judaic Noahide. Good night, Mercedes. Take care.